Good afternoon. Welcome to today's program. My name is Erin Payton, and I'm the Executive Director of the 19th Century Charitable Association, which is located in Oak Park, Illinois. Our mission is strengthening our community through learning, giving, and sharing our landmark building. Today is going to be another great program. We're so happy to have you here today. Before we get started, I just wanted to let you know a few things. One is, if something that the presenter says sparks a question or a comment, you can go ahead and leave that in our Q&A or in our chat. And if there's time at the end of the program, we will let you ask the question yourself by unmuting you. Other than that, just enjoy the program. I am going to bring up now Diane Moses, who is our program chair. And Diane is going to give the bio of our presenter, Megan Wells.
Megan Wells is a nationally touring, award-winning master storyteller and actress. She has received a Jeff nomination for solo performance, a Jeff Award for directing in 1986, Parents' Choice Gold, Parents' Choice Best of 25 years, and more. We're happy to have her back at a timely time, as this is the International Year of the Nurse. So a very warm welcome to Megan Wells and Florence Nightingale. We're happy you're both here.
Benjamin, will you come and open the window? The students have left. Benjamin, it is so frustrating not to be able to move from my chair. You must understand. Oh, excuse me. I do apologize. Forgive me. I am often very cross. I have been accused of being cross and too direct, and I must say that I absolutely agree. It is a fault of my nature. It is indeed a fault of my nature. I understand that there are other women who are growing up who are interested in the fields of medicine. Elizabeth Blackwell, for interest, getting the first medical degree as a woman right here in your America, Elizabeth Blackwell, and she was given to smiling. No, it is my nature. I believe that I was born with an inordinate amount of right. If we were all in the same room together, I would ask for a very humble showing of hands, but I know you are out there. There are amongst you those who suffer, as I do, with being right almost all of the time. It is very troublesome in the realm of relationship, though it is quite productive. I would like to tell you a bit of how this cantankerous nature came to do what it is that I came to do. You will see, indeed, that I am wearing black. It is not that I am a widow, for I never married. It is not that black suits my coloring, for you can clearly see that it does not. No, I wear black. My students, they call me the old black beetle behind my back. I wear black because it absorbs. You understand? When I was coming into those early years, my 20s on into my mid-20s, there trapped at home with my mother, my father, and my sister, whatever we would spill about our person would be read by our mother at the fireplace while we did our needlework. No, I did not want to arrive to needleworking at 9 to be read like a newspaper. So I learned quite early on the wonders of black, which absorbs all spills. And indeed, later, when I went on to Scutari. But we will come to that. We will come to that. I was born May 12th in 1820. Yes, so long ago. May 12th, 1820. I was born into a very interesting family. In my day, you must understand, we were just beginning to shift from 2 classes to 3. The world of England had been defined as the royal and the noble that served them, and the knighthood, yes, and the landed gentry, those who had inherited their great lands from father to father to son to son to son, and so on down the line. And then the second class was, you understand, you remember, you have read your Dickens novels, have you not? The second class were those who served. Now, in my family's instance, this was Peter Nightingale. Peter Nightingale in central England, in the Hampshires, had come in by blood to landed gentry. He was what was called the landlord. Yes, it is a very old term, isn't it? He was the landlord of Leyhurst, and Leyhurst was a beautiful pasturized acreage, forever acreage of some of it land so raw that its forests still held the promise of bright elven creatures in it. Leyhurst was an old estate, even by the time that my great uncle had inherited it. And he had 2 loves in his life, Peter Nightingale. He loved 2 things. He loved drink and he loved cards. Well, he especially loved to do them together. And so he would play cards and he would drink on and on and on until either losing or winning, somewhere where the moon was high in the sky and the clocks had long gone to sleep, he would go out from Leyhurst onto his pastured acreage, and he would jump upon his favorite horse and he would ride willy-nilly, merrily, wildly over the fields, jumping even the scrub bushes, shouting out all his ills to the heavens. His ills and his loneliness. For mad Peter Nightingale loved drink and cards and no woman, for no woman would have him mad as he was. So there it was that he came to the end of his life in a world of 2 classes. And as landed gentry, he must take care of all that served him, all that work in the lead mill on that land, and all that work the flour mill, the villagers and the village children. So who would he leave his land to? So he looked about the rest of the family, since he had no son, of course he had no son, and he discovered there my father. My father was raised as William Shaw. He came from the middle class, forming this new class of British, which were those who worked at some good solid trade, banking, or in the case of my mother and her family, and in the delivery of spices and sugars along the Silk Road, and in the invention of grocery stores. All of these things were burgeoning and blooming in those times. So he found my father, his little nephew, who was his opposite. Yes. William Shaw was slender and bookish and quiet. In fact, it could be said of my father that he too loved 2 things, books and my mother. Oh, you see, I am not given to smiling, but thinking on my parents does bring it forth on my face, though for many years it did not. My mother, Fanny Smith, was from the grocery family, and every man in her family pursued Parliament. Her grandfather had served his entire life in Parliament and had put his back and his reputation into the abolition of slavery. She fell in love with William Shaw, and they were married now. When they were married, they took on the whole inheritance of my mad Uncle Nightingale, and as the will insisted, my father also had to take on the name. Yes, you see. So I am not a Shaw, I am a Nightingale because of the inheritance. So William Nightingale now had Fanny Nightingale, and they inherited Leah Hurst and all its pastures, but its estates, being as old as it was, needed a fair bit of remodeling for my beautiful mother. And so it was remodeled while they went off for their honeymoon. Here we come to it. They went off to their honeymoon, can you guess? Many of you, of course, are already ahead of me. Where am I leading? They honeymooned in Italy, of course, and my sister, my eldest sister, she was born when they were staying at first on their honeymoon. They were staying there in Naples, but the ancient name for that original settlement there on beautiful Naples, do you know it? It is a very difficult name with many syllables. Parthenopolis, yes, Parthenopolis. It is not easily said when even you practice it. Why then did my mother and my father find it fit to name my sister after it? Parthenope. Parthenope Nightingale. I'm very glad that I was born second. Well, and I was born second. After some time, when my eldest sister was fit to travel, they then traveled to, well, it is easily said, to Florence, Italy, and there I was born. So I am named after a city that has nothing to do with my heritage, and my last name is borrowed from a great and distant uncle. I am Florence Nightingale, the name not my own, and yet my own. And very much now yours. Well, my sister and I, we grew up then there at Leah Hurst, returning from the honeymoon. It was remodeled enough. They had put in brand new staircases everywhere, brand new fireplaces in every room. They had added a chapel and a whole nother wing, but my sister and I did not care about that at all. We loved the outdoors. Now, my sister, she was ever racing ahead of me, as she was the eldest, of course. Her legs were longer, and she was always more lithe and graceful than I was, and she would take her journal book with her and her pencil, and she would go out and she would simply flop herself down right there on her belly on the pastures, and she would open it up and she would begin to draw. She had a fine eye for art. She would draw all that she would see, and I following behind her, also with a very fat pencil, but no wit as to how to hold it. I would chase after my sister with my own little journal, and I would not draw. No, I had no knack for it, nor any desire. I took notes. My whole life, I took notes. And you can see the littlest beginnings of these chicken scratches here in these little journals that I would pull together with letters of my parents and spice them in and write on their backside words. and numbers. I do believe I learned my numbers before my alphabet. Perhaps that isn't so surprising. Perhaps that is what you still do with children to this day. But in my day, my parents couldn't understand it. I would go about everywhere and I would count what I would see. I had a special place among the cedar trees where especially the mushrooms would grow after a good rain. And I would count how many mushrooms that I would see, holding my pencil absolutely wrong. And then after 5 days without rain, the mushrooms would be gone and it would amaze me. Now my sister would always call out to me, Flo, Flo, what are you doing? Why don't you draw? What is all this chicken scratching? Scritch, scratch, words and numbers. Words and numbers are inefficient, Flo. You ought to draw. You see, here in my drawings, Flo, you can see the whole of the room and all the people that are in the room and the emotion in those people's faces or the lack thereof. By the lack thereof, she was usually referring to me. But in this instance, she was referring to our governess. For how were daughters educated? Just enough and not one spoonful more. My mother was unable to have a son. And therefore the second stipulation in the will began to press on our household. The Nightingale, the taking of the Nightingale was easy compared to this. For our mad Peter Nightingale had looked over at William Shaw and saw that he had a sister, and decided, willy-nilly, in some madness fit, that if my father did not have an heir, though he had not provided one, if my father did not have an heir, then his daughters, should he only have 2 and no sons, his daughters must produce an heir, or the whole of the inheritance will go on to his sister. It made no sense if you were trying to keep the inheritance on in the line of the masculine, but then to punish the masculine for not producing a masculine, that you should then pass it on to his sister. But there it was our household. And so my mother's every waking thought was to get her daughters married. And I have already told you that I never married. And so you already know the great chasm in my household. We were raised by Miss Sarah Christie, the governess, to learn just enough conversation to be able to catch a man at the table when we were old enough. And so we had to learn our letters and all of that and such. And Flo was very good at it. She well knew how to hold her pencil and did so very well. But I, who had taken it up badly and no one had corrected me, held it wrong. And Miss Sarah Christie would correct me crossly and make me write in my book. Conscience is a faithful and prudent monitor. Conscience is a... I understood the morality in the phrase, oh well, I did. But the cramping in my fingers did nothing to endear me to Miss Sarah Christie. And so I went and got myself the whooping cough. No, you must understand, in my day, the whooping cough, I was 7 years old. I didn't understand that it could kill me. Everyone in my household understood that it could kill me, but I was 7, and all I understood was that it got me away from my lessons with Miss Sarah Christie. And what is this story that our lives lead the way they do? Because here it begins with the whooping cough. 7 years old, suddenly taken into my bed as I was. Who do you think would come to take care of me? Yes, of course, things run directly into your mind. The doctors and the nurses, of course, because we were family of wealth. But it's 1927. The doctor is still a very, very rare thing, and a doctor mostly used for emergency cases for the delivery of a difficult child, for the amputation of one of one's limbs if it was needed. What nurse? What was a nurse? No. If you had enough money, then you would be able to send for the doctor and he would arrive with his tinctures in his leeches. And we had enough money, and so the doctor did come at the beginning and apply the leeches. And of course, after the leeches, I slept, because what else do you do when your blood has been drained? Now, the rest of the care fell to the whim of the household. Always. Sometimes families were lucky enough to have an aunt or someone who studied it well and had no children of her own. Or sometimes there was a good cook in the kitchen who understood how to make the poultice and had listened well to the herbal instructions and knew a tincture or a good liquid or the right tea. But I have already told you about my beautiful mother, whose every waking thought now at 7 were the society parties that she was planning for the new household purchased at Embley. Leyhurst was not enough for my mother. Embley must be purchased just south of London for the social season, then to entertain. So when she swept in to take care of me in her crinolines, getting ready for the evening dinner as she was, her crinolines knocking about all the furniture. You don't wear them now, so you don't understand how they sound. I'm not sure that I can make it any clearer to you here. I have heard it likened to fingernails on a chalkboard, and it was very much so. I remember it still in my skin right now. That sound coming in. And then, well-meaning and with much love, she would plop right down at the end of my bed, and I was set off seasick, as if on a raft off into the center of a long lake. And then she would lean over me quite quickly, and with great worry on her face, as if I were already dead, she would take her hand and she would put it here on my forehead, like so, her cold hand on my hot forehead. It was quite searing and quite shocking, and I feared that I was dead. And then, of course, she would lift her hand and look at me as if I were the wrong color hat to wear to church that day. Mother, am I all right? No, you are not. No. And upset. She would leave me quite more upset. So that's what happened to my coffin. Oh, you forgive me. I have this didactic style. It has come from all my years of training the nurses. I ask questions halfway and then I wait for them to answer, for you want the students to come along with the answers themselves. But I'm only telling you a story, but you see, I am cross. I would cough. I would cough so hard that even I wanted to stop coughing. But did I understand then? No, I didn't understand then. I only knew that Mother had had enough of me, and suddenly my Aunt Patty appeared at the door. Now, how do I describe Aunt Patty to you? It is important that I do, for she is the very embodiment of so much of that age. My Aunt Patty was a sister of my mother, elder sister of my mother, and she had inherited such a mind. Behind her back, we would call her the Old Tulip. Now, what happens to an old tulip? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm doing it again. An old tulip, yes, you know, when it stands in its vase, the petals begin to droop, and then the petals all fall. And that is what she seemed like to us, her face like a tulip with its petals already falling. And Paddy, with all her sorrow, with mind like 12 white purebred stallions, stabled, kept from practical usage. Bored she was. Oh, there was enough interesting in life to do. A woman in my day always kept herself busy. But the deeper recesses, the potential of all she could think and be was stable. She was a great influence on me, my Aunt Pat. Now, she came into my room to take over the care from my mother, and with that sad face, though, she was quiet, and she moved slowly, and she was careful with her crinolines. Now, who had taught her to do that? I don't know. She came in careful with her crinolines. I hardly heard a sound. Did she plop right down on the bed? Of course she did not. No, she put up a little stool, and she sat next to me so that the bed did not move when she sat there with me. And she brought a clear broth, and she fed me that clear broth while it was still warm. And then she got up and she handed it to a servant at the door. So the smell of that souring broth was taken out of the room so as not to sour my stomach. Aunt Patty warmed her hands before she put them gently on my forehead. And her face I could not read. I could not read whether there was delight or sorrow in it, only love. Aunt Patty, how is it? Ah, you still have a bit of fever. No, but it'll pass. It'll pass. You shall see. What do you think happened to my cough when Aunt Patty left the room? Of course it was quieter, and I was able to sleep without leeches. Sometimes a great portion of a disease has to do with the care one is or isn't receiving. Well, I slept and I got well. And after I got well, I popped out of that bed and I went to take care of my 13 dolls. Yes, we were that wealthy. To take care of my 13 dolls, which were not named after the royal children. No, they were named after the children in the village. For I loved those children dearly. And I felt a great mothering care for them. And when Aunt Patty came to see me, I said, Aunt Patty, I'm Hattie, my dolly, they have got the whooping cough. And Aunt Patty said, well, of course they do, Flo. And so she helped me to rip up the old cloths, and especially the muslin, so we might dip it in the witch hazel and put it around their throats. And I turned to her at one of these sessions of caring for the dolls, and I just said it right out loud. I was 7 years old. What did I understand of it? I only begun to understand that I had a place in the whole of the world. It just came out full born, as Athena will do from Zeus. Aunt Patty, when I grow up, I should like to take care of the sick. Well, of course you would, Flo. Naturally. You will come with your mother and your aunties and I, and your sister too, and we will do our charity rounds. It was more than that, but I couldn't express it or even begin to understand it. I was well, and I came out from the bedroom, and Miss Sarah Christie had been married off. And so now who was going to take care of the girls' education in order to get them smart enough to catch a husband? There was no one that would satisfy my mother except my father. And my father took over our educating. Now, Parth is very smart, certainly wicked smart, but she didn't care for the learning. She cared for the dancing and the piano and the drawing, and so she was very quickly relieved of it. But I stepped into the place of my father's missing son. Do you remember my father had two loves? What were they? Books and Aunt Fanny and Mother Fanny. And so I was taken then by my father into his own private library. And did you know something I learned quite quickly? My father had a private library. He had during the remodeling a special wall built into his library so that when he wanted to, well, when it got a bit too loud between my mother and my sister and I, he would then open up that book wall and go behind it into another library of private books. That or to the club. He was ever escaping any tension in the house. But there, in that inner sanctum of my father's world of books, he opened my mind, and I took notes, copious notes, and there was no more cramping in my fingers. I understood well how to hold my pencil and my pen when I needed to make it final. Now, the cousins were ever coming along. My mother, she had 8 brothers and sisters, and so we had 24 aunts and uncles and 27 cousins who would come on the regular, either to Embley on the south of England or to Lehurst in central England. It mattered not. They would come for holidays and they would fill the great hall. I was sitting with Henry and we were looking out over all the family swirling and milling about, and Henry leaned into me and he seems to me, if we really try to, Flo, we might be able to solve the numbers of the family, X for Y. What, Henry? X for Y. Because they make some interesting patterns, and we might be able to come up with some formulas. Some what, Henry? Florence, is your father not teaching you your math? Your algebra? Your geometry? Flo? Father? Henry is learning math. Well, of course Henry is learning math. Well, I would like to learn math. I don't think so. No, I don't think that would go very well with your mother now, do you? Father, I would like to learn math. No, Florence, no. There is no need. The whole of the world of education is open to you, but there's no need for you to waste my time or your time in math. I want to learn it. Well, why? Because it's useful. How is it useful? I understand that it's useful to a man. Oh, you don't think that it is useful to mother when mother has to determine whether we're going to be at Embley or whether we're going to be at Lehurst, and how many of the aunts and uncles are going to be at one place or not, and how many beds and how many linens and sheets must be prepared, or when we have our holiday meals, of course, there are in fact the pies in the kitchen, Father, the pies in the kitchen that have to be cut so each man may have 2 pieces, including the boys, but only one piece for the women and the girls. Don't you think that takes a bit of math, Father? Don't tell your mother. And so I am changed right then and there. Changed. The whole world of it opened up to me. How I learned. And then I changed. Then I changed. And Cousin Henry did not want to play with math with me anymore. No, he began to look at me differently. And my mother certainly, of course, tied me into my corset and began to arrange my shoulders for dinner with my bare shoulder sewing and tightening and pinching and pulling. Oh, Florence, love, will you never learn to smile? You are the pretty one, but you're like a little bird in a nest. I know you are only thinking, but still, the whole look is rather off-putting. Smile. Oh, don't sass. How are you going to fetch a husband? I don't want a husband. Well, you're going to need a husband if you're going to have a son, so the inheritance will be safe. Well, what about Pa? What about my sister? She's older than me. Pa has been pocked much. Her face is scarred and plain. She is not the pretty one, not like you are. Our hopes depend on you. Yes, Mother. I never will forget the weight of that rider in the saddle of what I could become or not. The second time I had a call, I was but 18. I was standing in my bedroom. I was watching all my male cousins riding on horses, something that I really used to love to do. And could not do at this point in the day at all because I had to be tied in to my corsets. But I heard a voice. Oh, do not think I am mystical. I'm not mystical at all. You will find it in my journal when I was but 5 years old. Excuse me, I have dropped it. And when I was but 5 years old, I wrote into my journal all my requests for the good Lord to answer my prayers. And I put in dates. And to the prayer, the good Lord missed my deadlines. I was not a mystical child, but I heard a voice. Was it male or female? I know not. It was strong. I looked about the room. It was so real. Was it from within or without at the same time? I cannot explain it. It simply said, serve. I know we are not in the same room, so I shall spell it for you. S-E-R-V-E. So, how I wanted to. And I wanted to serve with medicine. When I told my mother that I wanted to be a nurse, she fell back upon the settee. She pulled out her fan, fanning herself as if there were some awful smell that had entered the room. Oh, no, Flo, you cannot be a nurse. Do you understand what a nurse is? No, a nurse, no, what would our whole reputation stands in the balance. Nurse, you know what they are, what abhorrent creatures they are, the kind of work that they do. there lowly in the hospitals, changing out the bedpans and the linens after the dead have left their beds. Sometimes they even give the doctors extra favors, if you understand what I cannot say. No. I didn't speak of it again, and then we were introduced. Half a year older than I, she must bow for a king, which she did. She bowed for King George, and I, being a year later, I bowed for a queen, Queen Victoria. My mother had dressed me in white with little pink florals all around my face and my décolleté to enhance my coloring, so I might fetch a husband. I remember bowing to Queen Victoria. She was just 19, same as I. We caught each other's eyes, and I could see that we both wondered how we were going to carry the burden of this man's world. There were suitors, only one that mattered, and yet I refused him. Seriously, 3 times. Richard Monckton Miles. He was a wildly funny man, kind, political, devoted to the abolition of slavery, pushing for the rights for women, brought me to lectures, brought me books, invested in my mind. Why didn't I marry him? I remember with that last denial, I said to him, "You understand that I cannot marry you?" "Flo, I do not understand. Do I not develop you whole? Do I not understand that your mind is hungry and that you have a great work that you want to accomplish in the world? I am willing to let you." If we were in the same room, I suspect I might have heard a few of you groan. He meant well. It is not the fault of men. It is the shape of the world in which both sexes grow. He knew no other way. He would let me. You see, there it is, Richard, there it is right there. A man has his work first, and the wife is his helpmeet in it, who cares for the house and children, and she has her charities, of course, which then, of course, must become before her little hobbies, which she may have a passion for. If she has a passion for a hobby, then it might be called work, but she can't be paid for it. Why is it that God should give me such a mind, should give any woman such a mind and a burning desire to use it and the stamina to do so, and then forbid her? Well, now, we only have so much time, and there is so much to tell you. So forgive me here if I shortcut some very important turnings, but they can be summed simply like this. I lost heart. Deeply. For a long time. There was much fussing to try to bring my heart back. But only one way worked. There was a friend of the family, Charles and Selina Bracebridges, who were going abroad, and they decided that they would take me away from my mother and my sister and all the harping and battering around, get married, get married, get married, get married, and their disappointment in me that I had said no to the one prospect that I had. They took it personal. They took me on a long holiday, and while on that holiday, Selina asked me what it is that I was truly interested in. Do you think I trusted her right away? I did not. It took some time. But after a little while on the trip, I began to understand who these two were, and that maybe my truth would be heard. So I told her that I should like to visit the hospitals, if I may, and we did so. We began to visit what hospitals we could. There, on our journeys, we visited the hospitals at Alexandria and Egypt. We visited the hospital in Italy. These were abysmal affairs, but there were nuns there. There were nuns, sisters of the church, sisters of charity, who were clean and careful, who functioned like nurses. Why cannot the Church of England have something like this? I would say, so Selina. Well, perhaps they can, Flo, and perhaps you will be a part of it. I would very much like to be a part of it. Well, you are going to go to Kaiserwerth, and we are not going to tell your mother. You are going to go to Germany, to the Kaiserwerth Institute, to study there with the Protestant. Not only the Catholic Church has these sisters of charity, no, the Presbyterian, Reverend Fleetner, is raising up deacons in uniforms. And so I went and I studied for 2 weeks, and I learned all manner of things, and how to apply poultices properly, and how to change bandages quickly without causing ill feeling or harm. I began to understand all of it. And I went home, and there was more fuss, but finally they gave in and they allowed me a volunteer position. I became the superintendent for the nurses, for the Harley Street establishment, for the care of gentlewomen during illness. Don't try to say that 7 times fast altogether. I was, of course, not paid, but I was in the superintendent position. And you know what I did? I applied everything that I had learned from, yes, from the deaconesses, but more than that, deeper than that, from Aunt Patty. Push the beds a certain distance apart so the crinolines will not hit while you are coming in to care for them. Open up the windows. Let us have some fresh air, some good air, some clean air. No, take the sauerbraus away from the table because it sours the stomach. Do not sit on the bed. All of these things we learned, and I wrote notes, deep notes. What works, what doesn't work, change it again, fix it, save the money on the jam, get the 3-day-old fruit. And then we got the cholera there in east of London, and I was able to leave that position, and I volunteered to help at the East Sussex Hospital. And there was a man, a doctor there, who liked to take notes as much as I did. And by his notes, he saw that the cholera was congregated around the Broad Street pump. And he, in a leap of imagination, decided why to take the handle of the pump off, and the cholera resolved. No, we were racing on a faster horse. Not only did how we care for the sick and the air in the room, but water had something to do with it. Water. Oh, we began then to wash our hands. Cleanliness and sanitation now were inarguable, and we are but a few leaps from Lister, and a few leaps on into germ theory. But not then, not then, because then we had a war. The Russians had decided, if you excuse me, I dropped my fan. The Russians had decided it is the ache in the muscles. We will come to that. The Russians had decided that they wanted to take Constantinople back from the Turkish, and the British decided that they had not had a good war since Waterloo. So they decided to send off our British boys, ill-prepared for that kind of battle. Now the French came too, and they had just finished a revolution, and so they were tidy and in spit-spot condition. But our British boys were not, and they were dying in droves. And finally, the Secretary of War decided, perhaps we should send some nurses. Nurses into battle? Not into battle, not into battle. But to the military hospitals. Just think how they could help. How could nurses help? Women around there with all the boys, with their shirts off from their bloody wounds. Oh, it is unseemly. It is not a place for women. No, no, no. I think, said the Secretary of War, Sidney Herbert, I think we should try it. And I think I know the exact woman to do it. Sidney Herbert asked me, Florence Nightingale, if I would bring 40 nurses to the military hospital at Scutari, there by the Black Sea, under the siege of the Turkish and the Russians. What do you think I said? Yes. What do you think I wore? Black. I needed it. By the time we arrived, there were only 38 nurses. 2 of them had already revealed themselves as being weak with drink. I sent 10 off to the General Hospital just up the way, so I was left there with 28 into the filth of Scutari. The bloody filth and mess. The boys, our boys, were laying in piles upon each other. There was no sanitation. There were no latrines. The latrines had already been filled up and were backed up for some unknown cause. Like we found the carcass of a horse down into the pipes and into the flowways. So the latrines were overflowing themselves out into the halls. These, our boys, had been left in these piles on each other, were suffering from dysentery. Thank goodness the cholera had not come. They were dying, not from their wounds, they were dying from filth. There were 200 women down below, their wives, who had come along this way to try to help out. I brought them upstairs, I put them to work. The doctors were not interested in us. We had never sent for any woman. Well, that's all right, we'll just clean. I learned how to smile. Thank you very much. So we cleaned. Now, to get supplies from one side of the hospital to the other side of the hospital would take 6 weeks. By the time you got it, you didn't need it. So I used my own allowance from my father. And I bought the shirts. And I bought food. And I bought beds. I bought a cook, Alexis Sawyer. He came and began to cook food that had some actual nutrition in it. We were there. We turned it around. And at night, I used to walk among the men, and I would carry my lamp with me to light the way, because the men will die at dawn and dusk. Oh, I suppose when you look at it, it looks like an Aladdin's lantern from some distance, but it is nothing but an old Turkish lantern, you see, like so. There was a gentleman from the London Times who saw it and drew a picture of it and called me the Lady of the Lamp. But it brought donations. It brought many donations. When I first arrived, 8 out of every 10 of our boys were dying. 2 years later, when we left, there were only 2 of the 10 dying. I was only a small part of it. You must do your research. Only a small part of it. At the end of it, I caught brucellosis, a terrible disease. You now have antibiotics for it. The Crimean Fever. I lay in a fever for 10 days. They cut off my long hair. I keep it short since then. And when I came out of it, I was not the same for 35 years. Brucellosis is a disease that works its way through your body in fits and starts coming and going and coming and going. After the war, I came home quietly, what to do. I picked up my pen and my pencil, for what can an invalid do? Queen Victoria asked for a report, so I gave her report, for I had all my notes, a 386-page report. I imagined the men in Parliament with their white wigs attempting to read it. I could see them get past the first 2-3 pages and then yawn for brandy. And then my sister's voice came to my mind, that sister who so long ago had said to me, "Scritch, scratch with all your notes, Flo. Drawing is better. It shows the whole of the room and all the people in it and all the emotions thereof." I drew a pie chart, like all the pies of my mother in the kitchen. And I put all my facts into those pie charts. They will call me the mother of statistics, but I am only an early adopter, except for perhaps the pie chart, which may be mine. I went on then to found the Florence Nightingale School for Nursing, which failed abysmally many times before we succeeded. And there is a never-ending story to tell you. But time is not never-ending. So I must close here. We will be in danger of going over time. I shall take a sip of tea while Erin and Diane take a moment to organize your questions or your thoughts, which I'm very happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Florence, so much for your insight. I wonder if you mind if I ask Megan a question.
Yes.
Thank you. Megan, what is your favorite character? You have so many up your sleeves. What is your favorite?
Well, that would be like asking a mother which is her favorite child. And I have to say, I don't have a favorite. The one I'm doing is my favorite at the time that I'm doing it. They're all such amazing women, and researching all of these characters, well, and Oscar Wilde too, researching all these characters have changed me. So I do love them all.
Okay, thank you very much. Wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Florence, let you know before the program started, when we finally got the right thing set up for your Wayback Machine to get you zoomed into present, that both of my grandmother's names were Florence. And you started to tell, one was born, I think, in 1906, and one was born in 1920. And you started to tell me why. Do you want to tell everybody this?
Yes. By the time Florence went into seclusion and worked behind the scenes as a ghostwriter for parliamentary men to make changes to the military operations, but was very secluded because of her invalidism. Even when she was teaching in the schools, her students used to come to her apartments. So no one really knew about Florence Nightingale. They sort of thought maybe she died, but she hadn't yet. And so that last 10 years of her life, when Queen Victoria passed and her son came to the throne, they honored her with the Order of Merit. And so this whole new press and publicity and gratitude and attention went out for Florence. She died in 1910. So then that multiplied it exponentially. So that whole age, 1900s, 1915, you will find an abundance of Florences.
That's such a great homage.
Yes, it is.
All right, let me see. Marky, I'm going to answer this only because Florence told us herself that she did never marry.
Never
married, even though she had opportunity to.
My sister did finally marry late in life, and she was not able to hold a child of her own. So there was no heir, but my father had squirreled away and tucked away the inheritance so wisely that there was allowances for all of us when he passed. And my mother and my sister nor I were ever destitute. The whole of the family took care of us, even though Aunt Mai did inherit Leahurst, and we no longer lived there.
And so if there was no heirs, that means you have no direct descendants.
No, I do not. But I believe each and every nurse that takes my vow is a child of mine.
Oh, that is a wonderful, wonderful thing to say. I'm going to read only because I know, Florence, for you, technology is very difficult.
Yes.
Our technology is. So I'm just going to read some messages to you. Marianne P. says how wonderfully your counterpart, Ms. Wells, expresses the passion of Florence Nightingale. Sean says, what a wonderful life history presentation. Joyce says, Megan, that was fantastic. Agatha Gallo says, Florence, your theory of how much the environment is related to health is so important. We are currently using this concept, clean air, wash hands, because I don't know if you've heard, but we are currently experiencing quite a pandemic, and your concepts are definitely coming into play. And Lori Branda says, Megan Wells is amazing. I've been a nurse for 40 plus years, also single, prefers to wear black, always right, therefore very productive. I like the always right thing. Sticking to your guns. And Dewana says, excellent enriched history knowledge. I do have a question for Megan, and I think we might have asked you this because we are just so blessed to have had you twice this year. How long, and I know it's different for every single person, every character you play. So for this character, how long did you research?
Oh, let's see. I had about 9 months for this one. I was asked by the Irish Heritage Center, by Teresa Chusky there, Sandra Gienar, a couple of nurses wanted to bring in Florence. And so I just fell madly, wildly in love with her, because I was a little reluctant at the beginning because I had learned of her as the lady with the lamp. You know, let's do this sweet little helpful nurse. I mean, it's terrible to say. It's a wonderful thing to be a sweet helpful nurse, but there was something sort of less potent about her. And once I started to research and realize that she was a powerhouse and fierce and actually not very sweet, then I was really intrigued.
Something to sink your teeth into a little bit more than someone who's yeah. Well, you had me tear up at one point. So as Marianne mentioned, the passion you had was very clear. Sharon says it took you 9 months like a baby.
Yeah,
and Ruth Foley asked, just for time, I'm going to ask her question. Have you ever thought of bringing Dorothy Parker to life, or have you already done this?
I haven't. I keep a list in the back of my head, so I will put Dorothy Parker on the list. Right now, I'm working on Helen Keller for next year.
Nice. So I'm going to ask one more question. Do you find, because you've been doing this for a long time, and do you find that there are some characters that either you age out of, or that you feel that you've done it and I'm done doing these characters? You retire.
The only one that I have any struggle with at all is Eleanor Roosevelt.
Okay.
And I had thought about retiring her, and then I finally realized what it was. Eleanor Roosevelt is so deeply private, so introverted and private,
Okay.
and not dead 200 years. So when I'm doing Eleanor Roosevelt, there are still people who heard her on the radio. And so I feel a tremendous responsibility to her privacy, but her political story is kind of boring. Everybody knows. And so I'm going
to push back on this. I think there is a whole new generation who needs to be reminded of who she is and the amazing stuff she's done.
That's probably true. Because I try to focus with her. I do try to give you some of the insights from the growing up. Her absolute awkward shyness, those early years with Roosevelt, and to give you more of the vulnerability behind the scenes.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, great. Well, I just want to thank you so much. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with before we conclude? Florence
Nightingale's greatest passion was for everyone to learn self-health at home. She wanted children to be raised to understand how to bandage, how to care everybody in the family, care everybody through the influenza. In your case, it's very, very on point right now. So she wanted to make hospitals smaller, and so that you really didn't need them because you all knew how to take care of. So she wanted children immediately in nursing practices, health practices, poultices, all that stuff, as common as going to gym class.
Wow,
which I changed the world.
Yeah, that and that can continue now, especially since we've been home for so long. Well, Megan and Florence, thank you so much for sharing your afternoon with us. We're so appreciative of everything you've done. And for Diane Moses and myself, I just want to wish everybody a wonderful day. Really quickly, if you want to know what we're up to, we have some Mondays left through the middle of May. You can go to our website, www.19thcentury.org, and there are links there to register. And if you want to help us continue to put on amazing programs like today's, you can also, there's a big donate here button right on our homepage of www.19thcentury.org. And every little bit helps. We would really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day and enjoy the sunshine. Bye-bye.